Well, hello, Congressman. I'm Brett Palmer, President of the Small Business Investor Alliance, and I'd like to welcome you to Evershed SBIA's annual BDC Roundtable. I'd like to make a quick introduction, give you a little bit of your bio to our audience who are joining us here. Congressman Sherman, Brad Sherman, is currently serving in his 13th term in Congress and has served the people of Sherman Oaks and the West and South of San Fernando Valley since 1997. In the current Congress, which is the 117th Congress, Congressman Sherman serves on three major House committees, all of which are quite busy right now: Financial Services, Foreign Affairs, Science, Space, and Technology. In 2019, he was elected by his colleagues to serve as the chairman of the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Investor Protection, Entrepreneurship, and Capital Markets, which directly affects BDCs. He previously served as the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Asia. And during his tenure in Congress, Congressman Sherman has worked to craft and advance priorities such as robust environmental standards, federal aid to education, healthcare reform, and the protection of Social Security and Medicare. He has supported policies to expand U.S. exports and to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons and to promote a just and effective U.S. foreign policy. Congressman Sherman also was one of the leaders behind the formation of the Consumer Financial Protection Agency, which protects consumers from financial institutions issuing credit cards and offering costly overdraft protections. Congressman Sherman's public sector service includes serving on the California State Board of Equalization from 1991 to 96, and he was the chairman of the board from 1991 to 1995. He is a trained CPA and a lawyer who earned his undergraduate degree from UCLA and a degree from Harvard. We're very lucky to have a person like him serving in Congress. So with that, Congressman, welcome. We appreciate your giving your time and your insights to us. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Today is a red letter day for me. We are passing the big omnibus bill to fund the government, the one we were supposed to pass well in advance of September 30th of last year. And that bill will contain my LIBOR bill. I think most of your people are at least aware of the LIBOR problem. That is to say, you could call it a $300 trillion problem. There's $300 trillion of debt instruments out there that are indexed according to the London Interbank Rate, or one of the several London Interbank rates. And so I could call it a $300 trillion problem. Being a politician, I am licensed to exaggerate, but it's really a $16 trillion problem because most of the LIBOR instruments are short term and they will expire before June of 2023. And so there won't be a problem. But in June of 2023, the Brits will stop publishing LIBOR because it was the subject of a scandal about a decade ago. And so you'll have $16 trillion of debt instruments, mortgages, business loans, et cetera, where you cannot determine how much the borrower is to pay the lender. The instrument says go to LIBOR, and there is no LIBOR. This is called tough legacy LIBOR, instruments that will still be outstanding in 2023, in which the instruments do not specify what to do if LIBOR is no longer published. And most adjustable rate debt instruments don't have a backup index. Who would have believed that they wouldn't publish LIBOR? Who would, So the bill specifies exactly how to calculate the interest under these circumstances. And so it takes $16 trillion of business away from the trial lawyers who would otherwise be litigating on every one of these instruments, saying, well, let's use this replacement index, let's use that replacement index, et cetera. And what's amazing, because this never happens in Washington, we're solving the problem well over a year and a half before we have to. Usually what we would do is wait until this was already impairing the value of these instruments. They were selling at a discount because who wants to buy a lawsuit? As I tell you, our appropriations bill for the year beginning October 1st is going to be passed today in mid-March. And which means that if you're running a government agency, you're told many months into your fiscal year what your budget is for that year. Um, if if any of the companies any of your members invest in have that as a management technique, sell. So the tradition here in Washington is to get things done uh, just in time, not to do harm, but not to do so much harm that it's front page news. And in this case, we're solving the problem a year and a half in advance. So at $16 trillion, this is the biggest problem that none of my constituents will ever know anything about, because we're getting it solved today. And off camera is Rob Revilliard, and he's my chief aide for all financial services matters, but he has devoted himself to this, year and a half, 2 years? And so this is the day when he earns his meager salary. That's background. I'm glad to be with you on. I'm glad to be with an audience that knows what I mean by a LIBOR index on the day when
We absolutely we do know what a LIBOR index is, and we appreciate your taking the lead on it, because it certainly is something that affects all the private credit markets, and it does affect retail borrowers as well. But particularly for the bigger platforms, you were right, and thank you for getting ahead of that, because this has been a multi-year process, and it's we all know that you had flowing hair like Fabio before you started trying to fix LIBOR. So this is a complicated issue, and we're really thankful for you're really getting ahead of it.
You'd be surprised how many different groups chime in when you're dealing with $16 trillion. And I'm not going to get one vote in my district on this. There's not going to be a town hall question on LIBOR.
No, but you're right. But it is something that it is not something that people know about. But you have been a real champion for the consumer and a stable financial market, and BDCs are part of that. And again, most of your constituents have probably never heard of a BDC, but they may be employed by companies that receive capital from them, and having that access to those private credit markets, those private companies have. So again, thank you for your leadership. We really appreciate that.
And thank you for what you do for small and medium-sized companies, particularly in the San Francisco.
Absolutely. Well, as we look at sort of the next year, and the previous year was spent a lot on different varieties of Build Back Better and the reconciliation process, which has obviously hit some bumps, and when you're trying to move trillions of dollars and make some big changes, it's hard. But it's not necessarily over. The reconciliation process, is still available. Do you see anything coming out of that for the rest of the year? Is there sort of a least common denominator that's beginning to develop, or that you see developing, or is that done?
We'll do something. If you listen to the President's State of the Union address, to the domestic part of it, he basically went point by point of Build Back Better without calling it one big bill and without using the phrase Build Back Better. And that reflects the fact that the individual elements pull very well, but the idea of doing another $2 trillion plus bill does not pull well. The answer is we're going to do absolutely everything the president mentioned if Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema agree with that point. And I was talking to Chris Coons. He was watching Mitch all through the speech. I would suspect that we're going to see Medicare negotiating pharmaceutical prices. That is both a policy win as far as lowering pharmaceutical prices, and it produces revenue to then do other things. Manchin is probably going to insist that any bill be not just revenue neutral, but actually help pay the deficit. And with the current inflation rate, he's got a point. So I would suspect it would do that. Exactly which of the expensive proposals in that bill he goes for, I don't know. I think we're going to get the 15% minimum corporate rate, in large part because that's part of something we've negotiated with, I think it's over 100 countries, certainly all the developed capitalist countries. And so I expect there'll be that. And whether money goes into child care, whether it, or um, exactly which of the programs we'd like to see. I know that Manchin also, and this is surprising given the idea that he's from West Virginia, which produces a lot of coal, which is not an environmental favorite. I think a lot of the environmental energy provisions in the bill are things that Manchin would support. But when you have a 0 vote margin in the Senate, every senator is a president, and um, uh, you can say, well, it's Manchin is so powerful. You start with 50 Republican senators who are using their power to say no to all of this. So it's Manchin is just the most visible of the senators who are reluctant to go with the whole package. But we spend a lot of time talking about what we can't pass. The fact is, this omnibus bill is a real step forward, and not just because of the LIBOR provision we pinned on it. And the rescue bill that we passed early in Biden's term, people have forgotten about because it's not the subject of a big partisan fight that goes on for a year and a half. It was a unipartisan bill. We passed it. It's done. And so it affects people's lives, but it doesn't. It doesn't get on MSNBC. They're not going to do a report on Fox about that bill Democrats passed a year ago. So I think that Biden has accomplished a lot. It's less than the whole wish list, but I've never gotten my whole wish list ever. I would expect that there'll be a major but not $2 trillion domestic package, plus the regular appropriations bills, plus some of the securities regulation bills that I know are going to be very important.
Well, you're right that the planes landing don't make the news. It's, you got to have some drama. Someone's got to be calling somebody else a nasty name to get attention. And one of the things that people in business are trying to identify is what's really going to happen and how do they adjust. And because again, it's hard to get good information because if it isn't dramatic, it doesn't make above the fold. As far as where the news is. And so, one of the issues that we care a lot about in the BDC world is the acquired fund fee and expense rule, which you've taken the lead on and been very helpful on. Your staff's been great on. And again, it's one of these things where the good news is that the SEC has identified that there's a challenge and they're trying to address it on their side. But you've taken the lead and had some foresight to put forward some legislation that would keep all the information public, make sure that it's available, so that no one's hiding any information, that it's all out there, very readily accessible, but that they don't get a bad calculation and misrepresent the real cost of what a BDC is, particularly for people that are owning the BDC shares on a fixed income. Because the SEC proposed, a solution. But their solution was sort of a 10% trigger that the indices would have to reprogram all their computers for and just sort of be this unique outlier, sort of a BDC unicorn regulatory structure that really effectively doesn't work. Though well-intentioned and admits that there is a problem that we need to fix. That's, we really appreciate your help and the bipartisan support you've been able to garner with 15 co-sponsors. Can you tell us what your thoughts are as far as the next steps for the bill and where that might be able to go and how we can be helpful?
Well, it's very important to get BDCs in the indexes. I don't have to tell you that. People want to see small and medium-sized companies in their neighborhoods, in their states, and they want to see that their pension plans, et cetera, have a vehicle to invest in those businesses. We do a lot to help small business, medium-sized business here in Washington. Here's something we can do just by changing the rule, in effect, getting out of the way of BDCs being included in the indexes. The 10% asset threshold fix, I can't say it's useless, but it's not. It doesn't fix the problem. That's why I've got my Access to Small Business Investor Capital Act. We've got some very senior members of the committee who have co-sponsored, including Bill Heisinger, who's my co-lead on this, Carolyn Maloney, who's second on the Democratic side, Blaine Lukemeyer, and Nydia Velasquez, who chairs the Small Business Subcommittee, is number 3 on Financial Services. And I hope to pass the bill or get my friend Gary Gensler to take this a little bit, move in the right direction. And I would say, and I don't care which way we accomplish the goal. I talked to Gary about it last month. I wasn't able to get the kind of commitment that I'd like to see. I think if we get maybe another dozen co-sponsors, particularly on the Financial Services Committee, that will get his attention.
Well, thank you. And again, we're a lot like you. We're pragmatic. Whatever the solution is that actually fixes the issue. Because it really was something that was, again, we understand why they did it. We were just sort of caught up in the wake of another, sort of unintentional. We just got caught up in it. But it did ultimately, hurt, your average shareholder, and it did, reduce the sort of market cops on the beat to, as far as, oversight from institutional investors to make sure those retail investors, have a sort of a big cousin looking over their shoulder to align themselves with as far as that information, that analysis. So we're happy to work with you on that and continue to press forward on that. You mentioned the Chairman Gensler with the SEC, a very accomplished man, both in the private sector and in the government sector before. You've obviously got a good relationship with him. The SEC is getting very active again, and legislation's hard to pass. The SEC has its authorities that it has now, and they've proposed rules that would create a big shift in the private markets. Do you expect recommendations for the BDC sector to be included in any of that? Have you heard anything along those lines in your conversations with him?
I see things affecting BDCs. I don't see, and of course, they did come up with the proposal on private fund advisors that I think will affect you. Back in 2020 on the end of the Trump administration, they went with the expansion of exempt securities, offering a package as well. I would say that on the investor advisor regulation side, you're going to see new disclosure requirements, prohibitions of certain fee practices. I don't see that as important to your industry as the fees and including in the indexes, but I think it'll affect some of you.
Thank you. And there's the private credit markets have grown very significantly for years, and BDCs are an important part of those private credit markets, and to a lesser extent the equity, but primarily credit. What is your sense from among policymakers on the committee and in the executive branch that you're talking to, as far as what policymakers want to see from the private credit markets as they continue to grow and as this market matures and expands?
Well, we want to see these smaller companies get the financing, whether equity or debt. And frankly, it may be, in some cases, a better business model to the private equity approach as opposed to the publicly traded corporation. The publicly traded corporation is putting out a quarterly report, is subject to a hostile takeover if their stock price goes down. And look, I've been part of the business world. You're a public company. You're scurrying around on the last day of your quarter, trying to make your numbers. And that doesn't lead to the kind of long-term business decisions that we'd like to see. On the other hand, on the private equity side, You can spend money on research. You can spend money on employee acquisition and training and explain, okay, our numbers are down this quarter because we've made these investments that will make us healthy in the future. It's harder to do that as a public company. I think another issue that comes up in the private equity area is when the companies are so large that they're larger than a lot of publicly traded companies. There is a tendency to try to use securities regulation as business regulation. It's the one area of business that Congress and the federal government are in. And we're concerned with ESG, environmental, social governance disclosure. Of course, with private equity, not so much the governance disclosure. And yet we do that through the securities regulation process. And I see us moving towards saying, well, if you're so large that you are bigger than most publicly traded companies, we're going to require some of these disclosures anyway. And that pressure wouldn't be coming from those of us who focus on keeping the economy going. I expect that the environmental community will be more and more of that.
That makes sense. And, so we'll be looking out for that, and those certainly are important things that our members care about and are actively going to be involved in that. And the SEC has been very clear that they want to prioritize ESG and its disclosures and the consistency for it. Now, so as we sort of wrap up here, I know the demands in your time are intense. One sort of thing I wanted to sort of close out on is, what should we know? I mean, you come from a strong and proud progressive tradition, and what should we know about sort of where Congress is going from the progressive worldview in a really dynamic time? We obviously have some, economic disruptions. We've got some global disruptions. You're a foreign affairs expert, and that has market implications. What is it that we should know about that we're not necessarily seeing from the front page, just for describing the progressive worldview of how to approach the challenges that are in the market in the world today?
Well, some of my progressive colleagues don't come from a business background. And so they come from an attitude that businesses charge as much as they want. If prices go up, that's an increase in the greed level of the company. That's absurd. I mean, if we have higher prices now than we did 2 years ago, that's not because corporate executives are more interested in showing profit today than 2 years ago. What's happened with inflation is we kept everybody's income high. We sent them money to keep it high. But then people go to spend money and all the restaurants are closed. The sports entertainment is closed. The bars are closed. So you've got the money that you're used to getting. You can't spend it where you want to spend it. You're on Amazon buying more stuff than we've ever had, and the ports in Los Angeles handling 20, 30%, and I think even 40% more volume than ever. And I think that an important part of reducing inflation is getting people back to restaurants, which is something, the restaurant experience is something we can make here. The Amazon product, the Walmart product may very well come through those ports. I think there is some division in the environment, in the progressive community, as to whether you buy the capitalist model and then try to modify it to get the social outcome that you want, or whether you simply have don't even believe that there is any competition, don't believe that companies are yes, maximizing profit, but serving their customers in order to do that. And so there's I want to see a fair society as much as some of my they would call themselves more progressive members But I would use the tools of capitalism to get there, and I believe that those tools work. Um, so, this is a lot of progressive rhetoric is coming from Washington, but keep in mind, when it comes to passing a law, we're not going to be any more progressive than Joe Manchin. And as far as passing a law, there's this reconciliation exception to the filibuster. You use that basically once a fiscal year. Everything else is not going to be more progressive than Mitt Romney. So the rhetoric is one thing, the actual policy is something else. And of course, who was thinking about Ukraine a month ago? Not a lot of Americans. Today, that overshadows everything. And we'll see where we go, and let's hope that on the one hand the Ukrainians can restore their sovereignty, but on the other hand that we stay out of a confrontation with Russia. Even a 1% chance of a thermonuclear war is a really bad idea. And these things grow, if you study, especially, I guess the case study is the process that led to World War I, where one thing happens and another thing happens, and all of a sudden you have a conflagration. This would be a more expensive conflagration. So I want to thank you for having me on, and look forward to working with you. I could cover one more subject, or I could just say
Well,
goodbye.
I know you've got demands on your time, so we won't take any more of your time, but I want to thank you for your support of small businesses, both in the San Fernando Valley, but also across the country by supporting BDCs and getting our capital markets to work and create economic growth. So thank you very much. We look forward to working with you and your staff, and appreciate all your time and efforts you've given us.
Thank you, and thank you for what your members do in providing jobs and providing the capital to the small companies and medium-sized companies that really make America go. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Congressman.